Welcome back. You're watching Live from Paris on France 24. I'm Laura Cellier. The headlines this hour. Iran marks 40 years since the revolution that toppled the Shah and gave way to the Islamic Republic. Today, the country is isolated and struggling under the weight of international sanctions, while human rights abuses are widespread. A Thai princess withdraws her bid to enter politics as the nation prepares to hold the first elections since the military coup of 2014. Support for ousted Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra remains strong. And a row erupts between Beijing and Ankara over a Chinese Muslim singer. Beijing releases a video of Abdurrahim Haid to prove he's still alive after Turkey claimed he died in detention. Turkey says China's treatment of its Uyghur minority is an embarrassment to humanity. First, hundreds of thousands of people have been marching in cities across Iran to mark 40 years since the revolution. On this day in 1979, the army stood aside as the Shah was overthrown and the Islamic Republic was created. Fast forward to today, 40% of Iranians live in or near poverty and human rights violations are widespread. Amnesty International says that just last year, hundreds of people were executed, some of them publicly, and thousands, including dozens of children, remain on death row. The regime is suffering under the weight of international sanctions, but President Rouhani says the United States will not succeed in derailing the revolution or prevent Iran from acquiring weapons.
Under the US sanctions, it is the unity of the Iranian people that will lead to victory. We must not let the United States win. Last year they announced that they could triumph. They haven't.
We've not asked anyone's authorization for the construction of different types of missiles. We will continue to increase our military force. It's our strategy.
Well, our correspondent Reza Sayat reports now from the streets of Tehran.
Iranians marking the 40-year anniversary of the Islamic Revolution with a huge celebration here in Tehran. Huge crowds despite a steady rain throughout the day. This celebration is a mix of a lot of things. You have people waving their flags, holding up pictures of the supreme leader, traditional bands playing songs. Every block, it seems, you have speakers blasting patriotic songs. And of course, you have chants of death to America, death to Israel, and your flag burnings. This anniversary comes at a time when many Iranians are under tremendous economic pressure, due in part to U.S. sanctions reimposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Despite the pressures, many Iranians here remain defiant.
There is a lot of pressure. We know that this is an economic war. In the end, we will be victorious. We will tolerate it no matter how hard it gets.
We will not be defeated. When we have endured so many problems for so long, we know we can continue to endure. Hopefully, things will get easier from now on.
Many Iranians still defiant, but many also saying they need to see the economy improve because they can't bear the pressure much longer. Last week, Iran's supreme leader suggesting that structural reform, perhaps budget reform, is on the way. Many Iranians eager to see if that's the case and if indeed it can improve the economy.
Well, back in 1979, the Islamic Revolution brought about a major diplomatic standoff with the United States when dozens of Americans were taken hostage at the embassy in Tehran. Well, Philip Crowther has been meeting those former hostages to talk about their ordeal and find out what they think of modern-day Iran.
John Limbert, lifelong diplomat and U.S. hostage in Iran. He now lives a quiet life in the Washington suburbs with his Iranian wife, Parvaneh. 40 years after the Islamic Revolution, he describes for us what those early months of historic change were like.
It was in turmoil, but for what we do, as what I do as a diplomat, it was fascinating.
That excitement turned into an ordeal in November of 1979. When the United States decided to grant the Shah asylum, Limbert and 51 others were taken hostage by Iranian students. Limbert thought he'd soon be reunited with his family.
So I told myself, oh, well, I'm going to have a good story for that. Of course, a day, an hour, a day, 2 days, 3 days. And this changed from a student sit-in to an international soap opera.
In New York, Barry Rosen, the former press attaché, opens his box of memories for us.
Here.
Rosen is seen here, blindfolded, and hearing the chants of death to America outside the U.S. Embassy.
I heard an announcement from Ayatollah Khomeini over the radio. And that announcement said very, very distinctly that he was supporting the takeover of the embassy. And I said in my mind, this means that we'll be here for a very, very long time.
40 years after the revolution, Rosen's account is as vivid as ever.
The Iranians would come into our cells in the middle of the night, use automatic weapons, cock the trigger, and count from 10 to 1.
Rosen, seen here, and the other hostages were liberated in January 1981. Since then, Tehran and Washington have been estranged.
One of the factors, I'm sure, are the events of 1979, 1980, and that is like a festering sore. It's never been dealt with.
Despite relations reaching a low under Donald Trump, this Iranian-American couple still believes in another rapprochement.
Someone said it very well. They said the policy in Iran now is to hope for regime change in Washington.
That report from Philip Crowther there in Washington, D.C. Now, Thailand is preparing to hold its first election in 8 years. Over the past decade, parties loyal to the exiled Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra have won every single election. The army ousted the last pro-Thaksin government. And the situation got another shake-up last week when a royal princess tried to enter politics. Shirley Sitbon has the story.
Thailand's political landscape was long divided into two colors. Red for supporters of popular and populist former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, yellow for Thaksin opponents, monarchists, ultra-nationalists, pro-army, mostly urban populations. Thaksin Shinawatra and those backing him have won all elections in the past decade, but their governments have all been toppled through court decisions or military coups, like the latest one in 2014 that brought current junta leader Prayut Chan-o-cha to power. 5 years later, tension was high at the Electoral Commission. The vote is just over 1 month away. Two groups presented petitions. A pro-Thaksin party, Raksa Chart, wants the commission to ban the junta leader from the election.
I want to submit a question on whether General Prayut lacks the qualifications to be a prime minister.
While royalist activists tried to ban the party backing Thaksin Shinawatra. Only days earlier, Raksa Chart had gained momentum, getting the Thai princess enlisted. Princess Ubultar was candidate to potentially become the next prime minister, but the king banned the move in a message read out on television.
The involvement of a high-ranking member of the royal family in politics, in whatever way, is an act that conflicts with the country's traditions, customs and culture.
A blow to the Raksa Chart party, which is crucial to form a coalition backing Thaksin Shinawatra, and which could now be in jeopardy.
Well, to talk more about that, I'm joined in the studio by our international affairs editor, Armin Georgian. And Armin, as we heard there, the official reason that the princess had to back out of politics is that in Thailand, the royal family should remain above the political fray.
Yeah, and I mean, it's certainly true that it goes against custom for a senior member of the royal family to run for political office, but that's not the whole story, because if you look at the party that she was going to run for, that party has been linked to Thaksin Shinawatra, a former prime minister who still has influence in the country, although he's in exile now. And of course, his supporters will be able to vote in the parliamentary election next month if it goes ahead. And of course, it would not have been welcome for a royal to boost the profile of a pro-Taksin political force. That would not have been a welcome prospect in the military, for sure. The junta would not have liked that. But also, one wonders what the monarchy really politically made of all this, because although the monarchy is officially neutral, they've said and done certain things in the past that led a lot of people to believe that they were actually favorable to the yellow shirts, so those who are going against Taksin's red shirts, yellow being a color associated with the monarchy. So although officially the monarchy don't say we're in favor of either a political sort of faction, they did certain things which made people think actually they didn't really want Shinawatra to have influence in the country. So perhaps the monarchy had some misgivings about the nature of this party that the princess was going to run for.
And it's a pretty tense situation because we are just a month out from the first parliamentary elections since that military coup of 2014. What can we expect?
Well, it's, again, we have to look at all of this in the context of efforts since 2001, really, to try and stop forces that are allied with Taksin Shinawatra and Yingluck Shinawatra, his sister. We had the situation in 2016 where the military designed a new constitution, which was really meant to keep those pro-Shinawatra forces at bay, in a sense. If you look at this election next month, what is it for? It's actually for the lower house only. That's going to be directly elected. But the upper house is not elected. It is appointees of the junta, its military people, and so on. And that upper house can block legislation from the lower house. So it's clearly a way to try and stop the lower house from getting its way, should the lower house swing towards those sort of vaguely pro-Shinawatra forces. So essentially, it's this whole thing has been designed, many would say, to entrench military rule. So although this should in theory be the first election in 5 years, that doesn't mean a full restoration of democracy or a return to civilian government in an absolute sense.
All right, we'll keep a close eye on that one. Armin, thank you very much indeed. Armin Georgian there. Now, Turkey has condemned China for its treatment of its Muslim minority after a dispute over a well-known musician. Beijing released a video that it says proves Abdurrahim Hayat is alive after Turkey cited reports of his death in custody and called China's behaviour a great embarrassment to humanity. Well, Beijing hit back and said that Turkey was extremely mistaken and irresponsible. The Uyghurs are a Muslim minority in northwest China. They speak a language which closely resembles Turkish. Up to 1 million Uyghurs are reportedly being detained by Chinese authorities, and many have, in fact, fled to Turkey in recent years. Well, for more on this story, let's go to Ankara. Our correspondent Jasper Mortimer is there. And Jasper, on the surface, it would appear that this is all about Turkey's solidarity with a Muslim community, something President Erdogan talks about a lot, but there may be more to it than that.
Yes, certainly. Look, the Uyghurs are Turkic and they are also Muslim. So there's a strong basis for Turkish solidarity towards them. China has been putting them in internment camps, and human rights organizations have protested what has been happening in those camps. So when Turkey came out on Saturday and said that these camps were, a shame for humanity and that the Uyghurs were being tortured, it did seem to have human rights on its side. However, Turkish government has not always spoken out on behalf of the Uyghurs. Late last year, an opposition party, a party called the Good Party, proposed a motion in Parliament criticizing China over its treatment of the Uyghurs. And President Erdogan's AK Party voted the motion down, perhaps because Turkey was about to receive or had just received a loan of $3.5 billion from China. Then last month, an ultra-right party, the Grand Unity Party, held a big and successful protest about what was happening to the Uyghurs, calling on the government to intervene in support of them, and describing that part of China as, quote, Eastern Turkestan. Now, it is now 6 weeks before local elections at the end of March. The prices of vegetables have soared. The government is seriously at danger of losing a lot of votes. And standing up for the Uyghurs is a sure vote winner. So it's not too cynical to say that the statement that Turkey produced on Saturday was written with the elections in mind. One footnote here, as you said, in the Saturday statement, Turkey said that the poet-musician Abdul Rahim Hayat was dead. Yesterday, China's Turkish service came out with a video of Hayat in which he gave the day's date and saying he had not been abused. Today, a Turkish diplomat was quoted as saying, well, if Hayat is alive, that's good news. But other Uyghurs are suffering human rights abuses in those internment camps.
Jasper, thank you very much indeed for giving us the story there. Jasper Mortimer in Ankara. Well, here in Paris, police are investigating after anti-Semitic graffiti was found sprayed across a bagel shop in the city's old Jewish quarter. The word Juden, which is German for Jews, was discovered Saturday after another day of protest by the Yellow Vest movement. The Council of Jewish Institutions in France, the CRIF, said it recalled the darkest hours of history. Erin Agunke reports.
Chilling graffiti sprayed in yellow letters on the window of a bagel shop. Juden, which means Jew in German. An anti-Semitic act in Paris evoking one of the darkest periods of the Second World War. The graffiti has already been removed, though the emotion it generated remains.
It's not reassuring. It's a scandal. You would think things were getting better, that life would be easier, but this is proof that's not the case. Things like this still happen today in France.
The shop's co-founder suspects the act was carried out on Friday night, prior to the Yellow Vest protest. He says he does not blame the demonstrators for the incident, though he does believe displays of anti-Semitism are increasingly visible. Just days before Friday's incident, another anti-Semitic tag had been discovered at a bagelstein elsewhere in Paris. After 2 years on the decline, acts of anti-Semitism are now on the rise in France, up 69% in the first 9 months of 2018 compared to 2017. According to the French Interior Ministry, 385 incidents were recorded, 1/3 of which were acts of violence or vandalism, and 2/3 of which were threats.
Regardless of who the perpetrator of this graffiti was, the gravity of the incident remains the same. We hope this will lead to a collective wake-up call. Of course, French people see anti-Semitism as a threat to French Jews, but it's also a threat to the whole of French society.
Over the weekend, at least 3 other anti-Semitic tags were discovered in the Paris region. And on Monday morning, swastikas were discovered on 2 graffiti portraits of the late French lawmaker and Holocaust survivor Simone Weil.